Good evening, my good tenant. Top 10 frames in Warframe 2023. I'm late, but that's okay. It's finally here. Now, in this video, we're going to go over the top 10 frames in no particular order. We're going to talk about them as a base frame and with helmet abilities, and then all the builds that go with that frame. So you guys can enjoy shredding everything that Warframe throws at you. Just a disclaimer, this is my top 10 Warframes. Everyone else's may differ from mine. I would be interested to hear your top 10 Warframes, and maybe I can make a part 2 guide as well. Let's get into the video. The first frame is Vault. This won't come as a surprise to many of you because it is Mr. Speedy Boy and hands down the most versatile frame in Warframe in my opinion. An insanely important frame to have in your Warframe adventures. The majority of the player base already has a Vault because he's a starter frame, but I feel like there are some that haven't used him to his full potential. Vault's abilities synergize relatively well together depending on what you want to do with him. Let me explain. His first ability is Shock. It's kind of useless unless you have his augment, which is called Shock Trooper, which gives you bonus electric damage. Now, if you're using Vault for Eidolons or arbitrations, this is where Shock Trooper is very good, and those are two very important pieces of content in Warframe. His second ability is Speed, an amazing ability that speeds you and your teammates up and gives you reload speed as well. His third ability is Shield. Now, this is a lot better than it used to be because you can now pick up your shield no matter what weapon you're running and gain 50% extra damage for free. And when you stack those shields, the 50% bonus stacks up with the shields as well. His fourth ability is Discharge, which is used for ESO farming, which is an absolutely amazing nuke ability for focus farming. However, it is not used for higher tier content, so this will be his Subsume ability for late game builds. Now let's move on to the builds. Just a disclaimer for all the frames, I'm not going to go full in depth on all the builds because then this video would be insanely long. So I'm just going to be very brief and just give you an outline of what the build is. And then also I am going to say pretty much in the beginning of each frame how they work without helmet abilities and what helmet abilities are good for each build. Just a quick disclaimer here that all the mods I have are late game mods, so for those of you that are still in Star Chart, just use whatever you have and substitute when you finally get the mods. So Vault as a base frame without helmet abilities is pretty decent up to STEELPATH. I do feel like when he starts hitting a bit higher tier content, he does struggle because of his survivability, so he would benefit from subsuming maybe something like Gloom if you want to survive in higher tier content, or something which more damage so you can kill the enemies faster. The first build is a speed build. You go high strength, just pure sprint speed, and then maglev as well for basically just smoother moving, and speed drift, and then a little bit of duration, multi-orbited, and energize. These are flexible. The next one is Eidolon hunting. This is my version. There are many other variants. This build just works for me for now. I will change it in the future. Subsume equips over onto your fourth, give you that huge damage bonus. Arcane nullifier to get that magnetic status effect removed. Very, very useful. Arcane momentum because I use the Vector's Prime because why not? This is one of two of my arbitration builds. This is Thermal Sunder, which makes use of the Thermal Sunder augment, which gives your allies the elemental damage bonuses as well. This build is an insane damage boost because it gives your allies electricity, cold, and heat damage. Strength, a bit of duration, that's all you need. ESO, this is the nuke build. You subsume dispenser onto your first ability because then otherwise Cephalon won't have a heart attack. If you spam this ability, you go for insane range, a medium amount of strength, and you just spam your discharge and you will kill everything. A great focus farming frame. This is the build right here. We then move on to the second arbitration, which is energized munitions, and this allows you to spam your Ogress over and over again. It's very similar to the first Eidolon build. Nothing really changes except minus the augment. A bit of strength, high duration, multi-efficiency, multi-orbited. It's that simple. Before we move on to the next frame, hit that like button, my good tenant, and subscribe if you enjoy the content. It goes a long way for me. Moving on to the second frame, which will be Ash or Ash Prime. A little bit of a harder frame to farm, especially if it's the base frame, although it has been made a lot easier. But Ash is very strong and is one of the main frames to take to level cap with if you are wanting to get into super late game content. One of my favorite stealth frames, does huge amounts of damage. You put on Zarta's Whisper and a weapon with Slash and you just shred everything. He has armor stripping as well, which is very important for late game content too. His first ability is Shuriken, which is absolutely useless without the augment called Seeking Shuriken, which gives armor stripping. This is also an incredibly useful ability for armor stripping, even for a subsume on different frames, because that is Ash's helmet ability. His second ability is Smokescreen, which is Ash's invisibility and his survivor ability as well. Really nice to use, especially if you have Archon shards with casting speed, so that you can pretty much instantly go invisible when you're at level cap when the duration is finished. His third ability is Teleport, kind of a mid ability in my opinion. It can be used to move around in certain situations. This is my personal helmet slot for the builds I run. Then you get Ash's fourth, which is Blade Storm. Now this ability is actually actually really good when you pair it with Silence Subsume from Banshee. And what this basically does is stack finisher damage with the Savage Silence Augment. I have tested this build a long time ago. I haven't used it in a long time personally. Now, Ashe as a base frame works quite well. You can take him to level cap easily, no problem, but he does benefit from helmet abilities in his third slot. So for the first one is Expedite Suffering. Now what this does is it basically just does all the remaining damage from your slash procs and your toxin procs in one go. So if you have 10 slash procs that have, just throw a number out there, 100,000 damage left, but you have to wait for the ticks. If you spam or if you click Expedite Suffering, it does it all in one instance. So you don't have to wait for the 10 slash procs. That's basically the simple way of explaining what Expedite Suffering does. This is actually really strong when you pair it with good weapon with high slash damage, and I'm going to make an in-depth guide video on this specific build as well because it's actually really good. So medium strength, high duration, Expedite Suffering, and then of course Seeking Shuriken for armor stripping, and then arcanes are flexible. Then we move on to the level cap Ashe build, which is the Zarta's Whisper variant. This just does so much damage for Ashe. Of course, Seeking Shuriken, Arcane Energize, Molt Efficiency. Remember, Ashe's passive does more slash damage. There's also something that is very important to remember. That's why you always pair a slash weapon with Ashe. The third build is the build that I just slapped together, which utilizes the Silence ability. As you can see, I put Savage Silence and Seeking Shuriken on. This increases finisher damage by 300% but scales with strength. So as you can see, Savage Silence does 685% extra finisher damage. Now this paired with Bladestorm does a lot of damage with your clones when they attack enemies for the finisher damage. And then you put on Arcane Trickery as well, so that on finisher kill, 15% chance to become invisible for 30 seconds. This is a pretty decent build, but I have made this version to be more energy friendly. That's why I put Equilibrium and Energize on, although I would drop Equilibrium if you want and then just go full strength to get more damage out of it, or a bit more duration as well. Moving on to the third frame, which will be Mesa, the gunslinger of Warframe and an absolute S tier Warframe in my opinion. Mesa is just ridiculously strong. The only slight problem is that she doesn't scale so well to late game content with her pistols. However, amazing frame for room clearing, defense objectives and survival missions. Her first ability charges her weapons and gives huge damage boost for one shot. This is kind of mid, respectfully, but that's just my opinion. Her second gives extra damage to her allies and jams nearby enemy guns. This is an okay CC ability. It's not great. Her third ability is very good damage reduction, offering up to 95% damage reduction. Pretty strong. Her fourth is her attraction, which is Peacemakers, which allows you to shoot pistols at the speed of light and doing lots and lots of damage. Moving on to her builds. As a base frame, she doesn't actually need any helmet, but she will benefit heavily from it. She can do Star Chart easily and also just base STEELPATH easily with no helmet as well. Although putting on Eclipse for the first build here is really good for increasing her Peacemaker damage, building a decent strength, good efficiency so you can stay under your fourth for longer, and then good duration as well for your third and first ability, and Arcane Velocity for that huge fire rate bonus, which gives you more and more damage. Really good. You can alternatively put Muzzle Flash as well. This is also really good for a CC ability, which blinds enemies as you shoot. Really good. Dispensary is basically just the standstill shoot everything build of Mesa. You just place down your dispensary on the defense objective and just spin around in a circle and everything just dies. It's huge energy sustain, pretty much the same version. Pillage is just the armor stripping version to go higher tier content, a little bit more expensive with the energy cost, but you have Arcane Energize here if you want. And then I also put Arcane Vitality here just to test with the pistols, although you can change this out. This is very flexible. For the general build, this is a no helmet version. It's just a base build that I threw together that you could use. This works really well because it gives huge damage bonus to Peacemaker. You can swap out a mod here to get more efficiency so that you can sustain your energy easier. This will take you through Star Chart and STEELPATH quite easily as well. The arcanes are flexible. Also, this is Mesa's pistol build. It's a 6-former build. It's quite expensive, but it is worth it because I'm using all the primed mods. Although if you do not have the prime mods, you can just use the normal ones. We go for a corrosive heat setup here. It works insanely well. The next frame will be Gauss. Now Gauss reminds me of the Flash on crack. Let me explain why. He's the speedy boy. Okay, Gauss is absolutely amazing and is one of those frames that doesn't even need a helmet subsume. His kit just works so well together. However, he can use a subsume over his 3 depending on what you want to use Gauss for. Now, why I described Gauss earlier is because he literally runs on smacking into walls and overcharging himself. Gauss is amazing, and I'll explain why. His first ability makes him go zoom zoom, sonic speed, that's all you need to know. His second ability gives you knockback immunity and damage reduction, which is insane. His third ability claps his hands together and applies either heat or cold damage depending on if you hold or tap the ability. You can combine them to make blast and armor strip as well, although it takes a bit long in my opinion. His fourth basically injects an enormous amount of energy in himself, giving you insane buffs like reload speed, fire rate, attack speed, and casting speed. So he just basically works on buffing himself and zooming everywhere. For his builds, I only really have 2. His base build, which is just a simple speed build here, which basically scales off of his 1. You build a whole bunch of speed mods and you will be chilling. Nothing really fancy. Arc and Energize Multi-Efficiency, these again are flexible. Then you get his second build, which is my favorite build ever in pretty much the entire of Warframe, which is the Energized Munitions Gauss. So Gauss scales off of duration. The more duration he has, the more powerful his fourth is. Now, as you can see there, 241% fire rate, 128% attack speed, 161% casting speed, and reload speed. It's crazy when he goes over in his red line with his passive. You don't need to really buff his 1 in my opinion. I don't think that is a huge speed bonus in my opinion. Energized Munitions with Gauss and any AoE weapon, because he has knockback immunity, is disgusting. It's just so strong. This has to be the most satisfying build to play. It makes any weapon good. Gauss is a brilliant weapons platform frame. He makes any weapon look good. Arcane Energized Multi-Efficiency, and this is the build right here. The next frame will be Pro Tier. Death turrets, shield gating, slash grenades, need I say more? Pro Tier is one of my favorite frames. She is disgustingly strong in my opinion. A must get for everyone in Warframe. Her farm is a bit of a pain, I know, but she is worth the grind. Pro Tier can literally clear all content that comes your way in this game. If there is one frame out of all the frames in Warframe that I would suggest anyone to get to do absolutely everything that Warframe throws at you, it's Pro Tier. Subsume over Gloom onto her 4th or armor strip, and holy do you have an insanely strong frame. Her first ability are grenades that either give you overshields, this is her survivability, or they do slash damage. I have recently done a video on this nuke build as well. Her second ability is her turrets, which do a huge amount of damage and continue to do more damage the more duration they have and the more enemies they shoot. Her third ability, which is one of the best abilities in the game, is called Dispensary. Dispensary gives you health orbs, ammo drops, and this ability is a brilliant helmet subsume for other frames. Her fourth ability is some weird time warp thingy that can do a lot of damage. To be very honest, I have never used her fourth, ever. To me personally, it's just better to subsume this ability with Terrify or Gloom. This is the main build that I use for Pro Tier. So basically you build a decent amount of strength, a decent amount of range and duration, and you basically want to subsume Gloom over her 4th, and you'll see that you get 76%, which is not max, but remember Pro Tier's passive is every 4th ability has 100% extra strength. So you want to cast Gloom on your 4th ability cast. That way you'll have the max effect that Gloom gives you. Otherwise, we do have multi-augmented that when it stacks up, it gives you enough to have max Gloom. Multi-efficiency, Archon Vitality to scale off of her Blaze Artillery, which is her turrets. As a base frame, she is perfectly fine. You don't need to actually subsume anything. She is just so strong as is. But the Gloom and the Terrify just gives you that extra oomph, you know, just that extra boost. It's just insane. Moving on to a second build, which is the nuke build that I made recently. I will put up a card on the top right for you guys to see that and see the in-depth guide. The way this build works is a lot of range, decent strength, and a bit of duration so that you can do a lot of damage with your shrapnel vortex from your grenades, and that is slash grenades, and basically just nuke everything in the room. And then you use raw to do more damage with your 1. It's pretty strong, and you can use your turrets as well that do a lot of damage too. The next frame is Saren, Spore Lady, spread space COVID. What more could you ask for? Saren is another brilliant nuke frame and also a late game frame too when played right. She's a bit tougher to take to level cap, but it can be done. Saren is also one of those frames that just has insane damage buffing capabilities for yourself and scales like crazy. If you haven't heard of gun buff Saren, you will hear about it now. Let's talk about her abilities. The first ability is Spores, which spreads space cobra to your enemies, and killing the host will spread more spores, and the damage scales with the amount of time the spores are up. Her second ability is Molt. She sheds herself, makes a decoy. This is Saren's survivability. Her third ability is Toxic Lash, which gives you additional toxin damage, and the damage is doubled for melee attacks. This ability also allows you to instantly burst spores as well. Her fourth ability is Miasma, spread viral damage to enemies, and this ability also pairs with the enemies affected by her spores, and it will also increase the damage of spores too. The first build that we're going to talk about is the level cap or gun buff Saren build. Basically, you just work on buffing huge amounts of damage. How we do that is basically we run Venom Dose, which gives you extra corrosive damage. You use Toxic Lash for extra toxin damage, and you use Zarta's Whisper. So that's 3 damage buffing abilities just for your frame alone. It is very, very strong. This build can go to level cap. I've done it before. It's a lot of fun. Then we have her arbitration build, which is also damage buffing, and basically this utilizes Contagion Cloud and Venom Dose so that you can do a whole bunch of radial damage with Contagion Cloud because of the Ogress pairing with Saren and Nightwatch Napalm. Just damage buffing, pretty simple, nothing crazy. This is the ESO farming version. Dispensary on her second, the same thing that you would do for Vault, and you basically just spread the spores and spam for and kill everything. The next frame we're going to talk about is Octavia. You knew she was going to be here. Come on, let's be honest. She is the strongest frame in the game, no debate. Just incredibly boring to play. Infinite scaling damage, invisibility. She's just absolutely insane, and her abilities synergize so well that you don't even need a helmet for her at all. Octavia literally clears all content. There is just nothing that can stop this frame, to be honest. You can go unmodded in the star chart and still clear it. She's disgustingly strong. Her first ability draws enemy fire onto a ball in an area, and the more damage inflicted onto Mallet, the more damage it does. So yes, it is infinite scaling. So the more damage the enemies do, the more damage it does back. Her second ability throws a roly-poly ball that picks up Mallet and becomes a ball of death. Her third ability, you do certain dance moves and you get good buffs. You break your pinky finger just to go invis. Every Octavia player knows what I'm talking about. Her fourth ability literally injects roids into the ball and turns up the dials and making everything do more damage and increases the range of her first ability. So as I mentioned earlier, Octavia does not need a helmet at all. Her kit is insanely strong as is, although if you want to go to level cap, you will need to make use of armor stripping, which is why I subsume Shuriken over here. But this is the build. It's just a leveled out build seeking Shuriken. Pretty simple, nothing fancy. If you want to do a normal build, you can literally just build for more duration, a bit of range and a bit of strength, and you are fine. Octavia literally does that no problem. The next frame is Zephyr, Bird Boy. Zephyr is that frame that is so insanely good that I don't think is talked about enough in this game. He has very good CC abilities and huge damage output with his fourth ability, and he also has very good movement too. Zephyr can pretty much do any content thrown at him and he can cheese it all. His first ability turns him into the true bird that he really is and yeets across the room to his enemies, or you can nosedive into enemies and do radial damage. His second ability is Airburst, which can pull enemies or push them out. His third ability is his survivability, which completely reflects all incoming projectiles, which is pretty strong, but he is susceptible to melee attacks, so be careful with this. His fourth is very strong. He throws down tornadoes that seek out enemies. Now what makes these so special is whatever element you shoot at the tornado, it will apply that element and also inflict extra damage and hit all the enemies affected by the tornadoes at once, no matter which tornado you shoot at. Let's talk about the builds. Now Zephyr as a base frame, he doesn't actually need any helmets, to be honest. The only thing he is missing is armor stripping, but that's if you want to go into late game higher tier content. I'm talking level 500 plus steel path. Otherwise Zephyr with his tornadoes is just so good. But with this build, Terrify, so that armor stripping to give him that extra boost. Simple build here, Molt Augmented, Arcane Energize, pretty simple. Now the reason why I did the Void Cascade of Tharos Strike, although I would prefer to put Seeking Shuriken on, is because you can't Terrify Thraxes and Acolytes. So you want to use Tharos Strike here, that's for Void Cascade. This is pretty much the main build that you run for Zephyr, nothing fancy. Moving on to the next frame, which will be Mag. I'm not even going to say anything, just watch this. I love this frame so much. She is just Wow. Mag is one of these starter frames, which is really nice because she is super easy to farm and she offers armor stripping, crowd control, and instantly deleting enemies. What more could you ask for in a frame? Her first ability is pull, which literally pulls enemies in. Her second ability is magnetize, basically puts a death bubble around enemies, sucks other enemies in, and this is big boy damage ability. You can also hold the ability down to surround yourself and absorb damage too. Her third ability shoots debris all over enemies, applying slash procs. Her fourth, she smacks her hands together, armor strips with the augment, also giving you lots and lots of shield. That is her survivability. Now Mag as a base frame, she actually does not need any helmet ability at all. She works perfectly fine. So the build that I run is just a simple strength, range, and duration, and then you use fracturing crush so that you can armor strip, also gain that cast speed, and also give you a whole bunch of shield per hit. Really strong build, can do high tier content and also the star chart as well. Molt Ormented and Arcane Energized, this is flexible. Moving on to the next frame, which will be Baruch. Monk Boy. I love this frame so much. He is absolutely amazing and he is such a satisfying frame to play and has a great kit as well. Baruch is very strong, especially for endurance missions. The downfall though is he's not the best for every other mission type. So that's the sad thing, but for endurance, he is an amazing frame. His first ability blocks projectiles when not attacking, which is mid. His second is his CC ability and also his main ability to gain his restraint, which is Baruch's passive. His third ability also gains his restraint, but seeks out enemy weapons and explodes them. Doesn't do that much damage though. His fourth is his prime ability, which is Serene Storm. Does a huge amount of damage. I do have a video going in depth on how to play Baruch. If you would like to see that, I will put a card up in the top right of the screen. So Baruch is quite an in-depth frame and actually requires a lot. So check out the video there and I explain everything in that video. So this is the Gloom Baruch build. Decent strength, decent efficiency, and decent range. Arcane Strike for that extra attack speed, Molt Ormented, and then Gloom as well. Tharos Smack, which is Thorough Strike, also a different version. Pretty much the same build, just with armor stripping. Pull, so you can pull your enemies together and then just slide through them and do a whole bunch of damage. And then Air Burst, which is just another version of it. It does the same thing as Pull. Pretty simple, straightforward. And also we always use the Reactive Storm augment for Baruch because that is his main thing that does so much damage. There are many other frames here that I would have loved to have added in this video, but there are just so many frames in this game that it's difficult to cram it all in one video, so I will make a part 2 if you guys would like me to. I hope you guys enjoyed the video and don't forget to let me know what you think about the list and what your top 10 frames are in Warframe. Don't forget to like and subscribe and I will see you all in the next one, my good tenor.